Now turning to the marketing department, I want to acknowledge Karen McLight, who's here with us as the department head of that department, for everything that she does in leading them. Really excited to have Tony Salerno, assistant professor in that department, who's been on our faculty since 2014. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tony Salerno. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be presenting some research to you from the Journal of Marketing Research, looking at how there's differences in either consciously or unconsciously pursuing different goals. Okay, so we all have different goals that we pursue. One of the more common ones up on this slide of eating healthy. Okay, so research has shown two different approaches to which we could pursue such a goal. On the one hand, as a consumer, we might decide to put together a meal plan, put together our meals for the week, planning ahead, or even just preparing our meals in advance. And so all of these goal-directed behaviors are very deliberate, very intentional. And so when a consumer is pursuing this goal in that manner, they would be said to be consciously pursuing a goal. Conversely, it's possible for a consumer to pursue a health goal without even being aware of having done so. So for instance, imagine a consumer walking into a supermarket and they see some promotional materials that says, "Start eating healthy today." Okay, so it's possible throughout their supermarket trip they could be making healthier choices without even being aware of the message itself influencing their behavior. And so when that occurs, they would be said to be unconsciously pursuing their goal. And so what we looked at in this research is how these two differences or two approaches to pursuing our goals influence our choice of options that vary in the extent to which they're either consistent or inconsistent with the goal. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a quick experiment here. So we brought undergraduate participants into our lab, and we manipulated whether they had a health goal, either consciously or unconsciously, and then allowed them to make a snack choice. So they chose a snack out of these three options that all varied in the degree to which they were healthy or unhealthy. Okay, so I'm going to share with you the main findings. So this is the choice distribution of the best option, which was the granola bar here. And what we see is compared to the control condition, which would be participants that didn't have a goal, just simply made a choice, those in the unconscious and conscious condition were significantly more likely to choose the best option in the set. And then the other observation here was in the conscious condition, those participants were even more so likely to select the granola bar than those in the unconscious condition. But then when we look at the remainder of the results here, the main finding I want to point out to you guys is when you look at the combination of the two acceptable options, that being the granola bar and Sun Chips, we actually see that the unconscious overall are more likely to choose a goal-consistent option than the conscious are. So the main takeaway here is when you're unconsciously pursuing a goal, you're more likely overall to select any option that's at least consistent, even if you don't necessarily select the best option. So in terms of thinking about implications of these findings, one area we could look to is advertising. Okay, so advertisers are constantly trying to create goals within consumers to purchase their products. Okay, and so we know that there's different responses that consumers can have to ads depending on the nature of the ad itself. So to give some examples of this, on the one hand, if we think about the recent Nike ad with Colin Kaepernick, it got a lot of media attention, a lot of consumers buzzing. This would be an example of an ad that really grabs the attention of consumers, and they process the ad through what's called the central route of processing, which would be analogous to a conscious purchasing goal. Okay, on the other hand, some ads we don't really pay much attention to, don't really process all that deeply. And so when that occurs, consumers process the ad through what's called the peripheral route of processing. And so an example of this might be your typical truck commercial where a lot of them just kind of feel and look the same, and you may not even remember which brand it was for. So in terms of how this could impact sales, I want to kind of share with you guys a mini case study with Loctite glue. Okay, so in 2015, the average cost of a 30-second Super Bowl commercial was $4.5 million, an astounding amount of money. And so with the prior year's sales down 4%, Loctite decided to spend their entire 2015 advertising budget on one 30-second Super Bowl commercial. The impact of this ad in the month following for Loctite in terms of sales. Okay, so here we find that they increased by about 9%, which when you factor in the fact that they were a 4% decrease in the year prior, it's really about 15% of a sales bump, which on the surface might not seem so bad, But then they also analyzed just the percentage of those who watched the Super Bowl that recalled this ad, and it was at a very low 13%, which, for a frame of reference, the typical Super Bowl commercial is about 44%. So that suggests that this commercial was likely processed peripherally. And so if we extrapolate the findings from our research, this would suggest some other brands that consumers are aware of could have also experienced a positive sales impact on this ad. And so one that might jump out to you guys could be Gorilla Glue, let's say. And sure enough, we look at their sales increase, a staggering 45%. That's almost 5 times as much as that of Loctite. And keep in mind, Gorilla Glue did not spend $5 million on a Super Bowl commercial. So the main takeaway here is, if you're a marketer and you don't have an especially strong brand like Loctite, be very careful about the advertising that you put together and ensure that it's not processed peripherally. Otherwise, you risk inadvertently providing business to your competitors. Thank you.